Hello and welcome to the BeLive studios here at Cambridge Community TV. And today we're having some guests as part of the Lesley University Institute for Arts and Health series on how the arts contribute to the health of individuals and communities. And today we are very privileged to have with us Christopher and MA.an Ellinger from True Story Theater, and they're here to talk to us a little bit about what they do, what True Story Theater is, the work that they've done in the Cambridge community, as well as other communities around the greater Boston area, and as well as all of the other theater troupes that do this kind of work around the world. So I'm just going to turn it over to you guys to talk a little bit about True Story Theater. What is it, and what's your work about? So,
thank you, Mitchell.
Yeah, we're really glad to be here.
So I started True Story Theater 14 years ago. I still remember our first show was right after 9/11, and we were inviting people to tell stories about AIDS. It was on International AIDS Day, but then we started hearing stories about how people have been touched in Boston and the Cambridge area around 9/11. And it just blew me away how this story that's about improv of your real life in the moment, how powerfully in service that can be for people. Of giving people a chance to share their feelings and then have our actors play it back for them, act it out for them, and then check with them. People felt really touched and not alone.
Yeah, it's great. And so now we've been performing every once or twice a week throughout the greater Boston area for the last 14 years.
Wow.
We're a volunteer company of 18 people, so usually 6 are performing at a time. And I think you have like a little clip that will show the audience what, this is an excerpt from a show that we did at the Arlington Library. So each show has a different theme, and people in the audience share stories based on that theme. So this one is particularly about the library.
Let me see if I can cue this up.
It gives you a taste.
Started with the story of the library, how people's lives are better and different because the library exists. We start by telling a little bit of our own story on a theme for the evening, and then we open it up for other people to share how their lives have been touched. After each person tells a little bit from their lives, we turn it over to the actors and say, let's watch. And then people get to see their story come to life. And like, oh my God, I can't believe you got the heart of my story and I didn't even say all of it. We're very fortunate to be supported by the Arlington Cultural Council because they have limited money to give to lots of arts projects.
Okay, so that's just a little clip about what you do with an acting troupe. Can you say a little bit about the history of True Story Theater, where the roots of it are? I know for myself, I understand it's from Playback Theater. Maybe you can say a little bit about Playback Theater.
Playback Theater is in over 50 countries in the world, but very few people have heard about it in the United States. And that feels like a terrible shame that people are missing out on some of the most dynamic and emotionally compelling forms of improvisational theater. We started it because Ann and I, we're both a couple, but we've also run a series of nonprofits and have had conferences where we want people to connect around really deep issues. And we brought in a playback theater company, and we were amazed at just how deep people came and how connected people got to feel after a show.
Yeah. Let us, I see your, we have a little slideshow, so if you go back to there, we can just talk through those slides, which will give the readers sort of an overview of some sense of both our company and what we do. So if you go to the next one, no, after what happens in a show, so we showed that. Great. So we were starting to explain that we've done a lot of shows, and that we often are exploring social issues through different themes. So the examples that were up there are about crossing the class divide or stories of disabilities. And every month we do a different theme in Arlington, which it's not that far from Cambridge to Arlington. We're right on the 77 bus at a yoga studio there, and we invite all the viewers to come check it out. Our next monthly show is going to have the theme Courageous Interventions, Stories of Active Bystanders. So you'll hear a lot of inspiring stories from people in the audience about when they have or have not stood up.
And taken a risk to put themselves on the line.
Right.
Or not, and how that felt.
And then the actors will dramatize whatever the feelings are that were shown. Christopher, you could do the next one.
So we're always bringing in new people into our troupe as people leave. And all of us in the troupe come from different backgrounds. Very few people are actors, but they're educators and scientists and singers, and all of us are changed through doing this work by opening our hearts to the stories of people in the community. It's really changed my life.
Christopher also teaches playback, and people are moved and changed by viewing it, but even more by actually doing it. It's a way of practicing, we call it embodied empathy. And so we do regular classes in Arlington, and Mitch, where you teach at Lesley University, we've taught courses there, and we've helped start new playback companies in Portland, Maine, and we just went to Tampa, Florida. So we're trying to be like little Johnny Appleseed spreading playback companies.
Many of our
around.
students either join while they're students or join afterwards.
Right,
Hook
right.
up with you guys.
So it's a good flow
Oh,
back
that's
and
a
forth
connection.
between us.
And I noticed on this slide, I'm going to switch back to the slide, that that it supports community dialogue. And
Right, you want to
maybe
speak to that,
say some more
Christopher?
about that?
Yeah, because it's live as opposed to scripted theater, people are going to tell something that's true for their lives, and other people in the audience might have a judgment about that person, like we did stories of Palestinian and Jewish students who don't talk to each other in the same school. And you may disagree with people's politics, but when you hear people's real life experiences and struggles, you can't help but be touched by it and affected by it.
Yeah, well said.
I think it might be helpful to tell the audience, switch this back, to tell the audience a little bit about how this works. I've seen many of your shows. I've also been involved in playback theater myself, going back 35 years ago.
Yeah.
But I don't know if our audience really understands really how this works. So maybe you
Yeah.
can talk a little bit about.
We tried to describe it. You're talking when you come into a show is usually
So I'm just
an
a person in
hour.
the community,
Yeah.
or maybe I'm a part of a school or a part of a group, and you come
and
in.
we come in. Usually a performance is maybe an hour, hour and a half in there, and we might hear from 8 to 12 people during the course of that time. So someone, often it's Christopher, sometimes me, plays a kind of MC role, and we help people like come forward and share just really briefly, it might be 30 seconds or 3 minutes, some important moment in their lives based on whatever the theme is of the show.
And we ask for volunteers, so
Right.
we're at the Community Arts Center in Cambridge.
Okay.
And of course, all the kids are raising their hands, pick me, pick me.
Uh-huh.
So of course, we have to pick some of the kids and
Yeah.
we invite them up. And they're sharing stories about their lives also. And then we invite the actors, just like in any story, to do our best to put ourselves in the shoes of that kid or that person who's telling the story.
Right.
And so what was shared gets embodied, usually by 4 actors and a musician, and we use movement, music, dialogue. It's very physical, it's very emotional, and again, the pieces are pretty short. It might be a minute, it might be at most 10 minutes
Right.
that we embody the story, and then we always check back with whoever shared to say, well, how was that to watch it? How are you affected by seeing it? And people are often laughing and crying, and it's very powerful to see your own story reflected back.
Now I know you've been in a lot of different places, and I'm going to queue up a video in a minute about that took place. I believe it was in a prison. Is that where it took place?
There's another troupe that works in a prison,
Okay.
Sing Sing Prison.
Okay.
We've worked ongoingly for 6 years with a support group of people who have gotten out of prison.
Okay.
But the little clip you have was one show that we did, I guess we did two of them at the New England Center for Homeless Veterans.
Homeless veterans,
Yeah,
that's what it was.
so it was
Okay.
downtown Boston,
Let's see
and
if I can cue
a
it up.
very diverse room full of people with amazing and inspiring stories about their lives. And even people who had been coming to the center for many years and knew each other, many of them said, we never knew that about you, that people got to.
And they were so touched that
Yeah.
we came in to act out their stories for them.
Why don't we take a look
Yeah,
at
so here's
some
just
of
one
what they,
person.
yeah.
It was a pleasure seeing this troupe group. They are real professional. We're capturing all of us and portraying our hardship or whatever you want to call it. And they had a way, like you read our mind, it was magic.
It's very humbling to hear other people's experiences and to share my own.
I feel good today. I feel like going on. Thank you.
And I feel very relaxed and eased. And I hope you guys come back again because I think it's a really great asset here for the veterans.
I always
Okay.
feel so affectionate with people after a show. It's like you walk into a room of strangers and we're strangers to them.
Yeah.
And then by the end of people sharing in this way and of us taking a risk to put ourselves in their shoes, we feel this really powerful bond. That's an
There's-
important part of the healing that happens.
One show pretty recently that I really felt that was at the Central Square Theater here in Cambridge, and it was the theme of the show was stories of the port, which is Area 4 here, not Cambridge Port, but a little bit further north. And many of the people in the audience were people who grew up there. And so the fact that in front of each other they got to share these stories about really kind of a way of life that's gone now and was pretty invisible then. I remember one person talking about growing up in the projects when those were really safe and wonderful places to grow up with teams of kids, and she took us in her story into the underground basement rooms that were connected, and everyone in the room felt like there with her.
So I know that when a person tells a story, so say I would come up from an audience
Yeah.
and tell a piece of my life.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a difficult piece of my life. I mean, some of these places that you go to, and particularly some of the themes of the shows are about difficult themes.
Yeah.
So I take a risk, and I come up to tell my story, and one of you or one of the actors is, in essence, interviewing me.
Right.
And then at some point, you as the interviewer are guiding the story, guiding it in terms of
collaborative
in a
way.
collaborative way, but helping me to share the essence of that story.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
And then at some point, you're going to say, okay,
We have enough.
we have enough, just
Let's
watch.
watch.
And then the actors, from my understanding, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about this, is they're not replaying the literal story
Yes.
all the time.
We're trying to capture the essence of the person's inner experience.
Yeah.
So there will be some scenes that happen that have some literal tie to your experience, but more importantly, we may take it metaphorically, it could be in music and dance, but we're still trying to catch really what you're feeling in a deep way so that you can say, yeah, you really got it.
So you're doing this in your heart.
Yes.
So there's some emotional and empathic connection that the whole group is trying to create. This is the healing process.
That's what I was
This
just
is
going to
yeah.
say. I know your show is about, and
Yeah.
how does art relate to health and to healing?
Right.
And we've definitely heard stories of people afterwards say, sometimes it completes the experience for people. Like they go oh, I've been carrying that story with me for a really long time and not able to let it go. And now I feel like I don't need to keep thinking about it. I remember there was one of a car crash that someone told actually at first night. And he just felt sort of lightened up by it.
He was first telling it as if it were a joke, and I was saying, what you're telling sounds really
It's horrific.
horrible.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he paused for a moment
Right.
and dropped to a deeper place
Yeah.
of how actually he was really upset about it.
Yeah. And other times the healing is to not be alone, because people, I think, feel ashamed about things that they go through. We did recent shows that were about body image and people struggling with weight or struggling with addictions. And there's just a sense like, oh, many people in the room have been through this too, and often we ask, like, anybody relate to this? And half the room raises their hands. So there's something about not feeling as alone.
So I don't have to tell my story in order to be part of the community, and feel some also healing in myself as a witness, as an audience member.
Definitely.
And often shows end where we always invite some feedback at the end, and often people are saying, wow, I felt like I could relate. Even though I didn't have that person's experience, that person came up with a really different background than me, but I feel so connected to every single person's story that was shared.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your experience. I'll put you on the spot now.
Right, because you...
So what's...
As we're talking, I'm remembering, because it's been a while, 35 years ago. So 35 years ago, I was in between college and graduate school, and I was living in New Paltz, New York, where Jonathan Fox and Joe Salas, who are the founders of Playback Theater, lived, and I went there because a friend of mine was in their original troupe, and they invited me in. And
was it powerful for you doing it?
It was very powerful,
yeah.
And I remember that my first experience was going to a friend of mine was in this troupe, and he invited me and some of our friends to come and witness. So we went to it was in a firehouse, an old firehouse that was converted into a open kind of space, and for some reason I raised my hand to go tell a story. And I told a story of auditioning for the New England Conservatory in one of their music programs, and it was a horrible experience. It was a terrible.
And was it healing to have the story played back?
And the story was played back, and it was just amazing.
Yeah.
It was just amazing, and I was just hooked from that moment on. I just was. This is an incredible community forum.
Yeah.
That might be a good segue to show, because we have a little film segment that is about. We were saying that playback has spread all around the world, and it's not only here in Boston, but there's about 76 companies, and in the last couple
in the U.S. and Canada, and hundreds around the world.
Right.
The beauty of using theater or the arts for social change is it's nourishing.
See me.
She's in our company.
See me.
I work with Aboriginal women, families grieving loss from homicide.
Communities who've been displaced as a result of genocide, war, or human rights violations.
Mental health settings to social service settings.
7th grade students, 12 and 13-year-olds.
Men serving life sentences.
The network is about connection, about getting energy, about being excited about the work.
We are now able to talk with each other, exchange ideas.
We need a place to be reaffirmed about our identity.
Being in a network with people who are committed to ritual, committed to play, committed to service, committed to community, gives me the resources I need to explore my edge with wings on.
What we do makes change happen inside of people.
We need to get together to know how to better our practice.
The network is invaluable.
I love playback.
I do too. And we had our first gathering of this network in North America at Lesley just a few years ago.
Right.
And that was the first time all of us came together from North America to explore how are we doing this work in
I was a
different
part of it. I
communities.
came to some of those days when there were so many groups from around the world, and they did some very powerful performances.
So in addition to performing around Cambridge and other parts of Boston, part of our mission is really wanting this form to spread, and we feel like it can be 76 companies sound like a lot, but it's really not. There's, it's hours of driving between each company, and also wanting this kind of embodied listening to be done off the stage. You don't need a playback company in order to like really hear people well and experiment with this kind of empathizing through playing back somebody's story.
Every community group could do this. Every school could have this. So we were recently, just a week or two ago, at Harvard doing something with young and senior LGBT folks who were in an exchange of stories and dialogue about really different life experience because so much has changed even in the last 10 years. And so we did a performance for them, and then we invited them to take a risk and do it for each other. And that was so wonderful to get to see the young people play out the older people's stories, and they were really moved by it, and vice versa.
Right. And you've come to Lesley a number of times to conferences that we've run, arts and health and healing conferences, arts and activism conferences, and graduations, at some of our ending rituals, and they come with a group of actors, and they come at the end and really capture what's happened in 2 days or 3 days of a conference where people are sort of very immersed in some deep and heavy subjects. We've had people from Rwanda talking about genocide that happened there, and most recently from Cambodia and the genocide there, and just activists around the Cambridge area as well, working in many of these places like where you work. And then you come in and...
What impact did you see when you've come in?
Well, I think it helps to capture, like you talked about when an individual comes and tells a story, and you try to get the essence of the story. I think at the end of these experiences, what I've experienced is capturing the essence of the experience of witnessing and being immersed in these talks and workshops for a number of days. Sometimes the feelings are all, inside, and it's not clear.
Can be overwhelming.
And can be overwhelming.
Hearing, right.
Yeah. So it helps to synthesize and bring it together.
Yeah.
So
part of what I love about this forum is that it can hold any kind of story. So you named some very intense, heavy things. It has been used for stories of genocide and playing. But I can remember one we did of 150th anniversary of a church, and sharing stories or somebody's 80th birthday.
I just wanted to say, I wanted to invite everybody to come to the River Festival next Saturday.
I was hoping you'd get to that.
At 1:30 at the Story Stream tent. So.
Is there a theme for that one? Do you remember what?
It's just stories from our lives, so people can share on all kinds of things. And we do a monthly public show in Arlington, which Jan mentioned, but everybody is invited to come to. Second Saturday of every month.
And on our website, truestorytheater.org, or our Facebook page, you can see listings of upcoming events, both workshops, classes, and performances. There's lots to choose from.
So I also know that you're doing some other performances in the Cambridge area. Before we went on air, you were talking about at the Elder Center down the street, I think?
Yes, at the Council on Aging, we're going to do one on elder abuse. So there are going to be stories of how seniors have been scammed or taken advantage of by family members, or there's a number of stories that have been shared because people can't come and share them themselves, but we're going to have other elders read them, but we'll act them out. And this is a kind of advocacy work around arts and health. So people can really understand just how challenging it is for so many people, and how much abuse is happening all around us that we're not even aware of.
So who should come to a show like that?
Well, anybody who's close to somebody who's elderly.
Or works in the field in any way.
Or works in the field.
Yeah.
Nurses. Health workers.
Yep, it brings those
educators.
issues really alive. And I think they're also going to be sharing resources in Cambridge for if people are in those kinds of situations. But it's so much more impactful, instead of just seeing like a panel of experts or a PowerPoint presentation, to have it complemented by this kind of real life drama.
Right. So anybody in a show like this could come up and tell a story about someone they knew, someone they know, somebody they heard about, or an elder person who's
Yeah.
actually experienced some kind of abuse in some form.
Yeah, or how
Yes.
people are affected, because we're going to act out a few stories to begin with, and so we often ask for audience reaction. So what stirred up for you about seeing these kind of things that go on in our community?
Great, and so we've got about 2 more minutes left, and I just want to, before we wrap up, also talk a little bit about how someone who might be interested in joining you as an actor, or there are musicians
like
that are
that,
part of
yeah.
your group. And
What a lovely question, Mr.
Yeah.
So contacting me is the best way. So going to our website to look at information about auditioning and coming to a show, first of all, or to a class.
So what kind of background would I need to join you
So
guys?
you don't have to be...
Do I need to be a professional actor?
You don't have to be a professional actor. What you have to be is really fantastic as a listener. Be able to put your own experience aside and really be willing to put yourself in other people's shoes.
Okay.
And people come with lots of different backgrounds. It helps if you have some acting background also. Dancers are often really good playback people, because it's a lot you need to be in your body. So, but you don't have to be a pro actor. And in fact, it's all volunteer, so I have to say that's part of...
But you do have to learn how to be tuned in, how to be empathic.
You learn so much. I have grown and changed a lot by being part of it.
Yeah. So I know you had a rehearsal this afternoon. You have regular rehearsals to help
Twice
people
a month. Yeah.
to people to become sensitive to how
and we
they can
share each other's stories, so that's how we get to know each other pretty well.
And I would have thought I would never have gotten into a playback company. And I wake up every day thinking, I'm just so amazed and so grateful that I get to do this kind of work.
Okay, and I just want to remind everybody that this is part of a series